deposits to check out.
Alright guys, hopefully you have watched the first two videos and have figured out kind of what distributive property is doing here. So I'm going to go with you on these terms here and show you how to do this real quickly. We're going to be simplifying some terms with distributive property, and then we're going to combine them with our combining like terms as well. So when we do these things, this is the distributive property allows us to multiply. That's the big thing here. We're going to be multiplying the term on the outside of the parentheses by the number that's, or the numbers or the terms inside the parentheses. And so it's distributing. And basically what happens, the term on the outside is a factor. Okay? So that term is the factor of what's going to be outside. So that we want 3 times as much, or 2 times as much, or 5 times as much, or -6, or whatever it says on the outside. So how do we read this? So it says algebraically, we would say A times the quantity B plus C. So we're saying we want A times as much of what B and C give us. And we would solve this by just simply taking the A goes to the B, because we're taking A times B, which we would write A times B. And then the A goes to the C, A times C. And we use the sign in the middle to determine how to simplify that even further. So this case would be a plus. Now if you have a minus in between here, it's going to be the same thing. The A will go to the B by multiplying, and the A will go to the C by multiplying also. And the term, and how do we simplify it? We're going to simplify it by subtraction in this case, because that's what's separating our two terms in our parentheses. But we have to be careful when we have the term on the outside or the term that's on the inside, because when we multiply by positive and negatives, we have to be careful about what our signs are. And we will get into those and see what we're talking about. We have to be careful about the signs on the outside and also on the inside. Okay? An example of that would be if you have a negative A times a B plus a C. This would end up giving us negative AB, and then the negative A goes to the C, which would give us a negative AC. So you can write it like that. Or if you want to, but it's not very good at math to write it, you could write it out as this. It'd be the same way. Okay? So we have to be careful about our signs and about what do a minus and a minus give us and a plus and a minus give us when we multiply in this case. All right? So let's take a look at a picture example here. It's saying you're buying 2 tickets, you bought a popcorn and 2 drinks, but you bought them for how many groups? You bought them for 3 groups of friends. So this right here is the factor. This is what we're going to increase it by. We're going to increase it by a factor of 3. So we could do this if you wanted to. You could list them all out. We have a popcorn, 2 tickets, 2 drinks, a popcorn, 2 tickets and 2 drinks, a popcorn, 2 tickets and 2 drinks. And then we could put them all together and combine the terms together and end up getting that solution. But that takes us a little bit of a long time to do that. The shorter way, or the more simpler way for us, that's why it's called simplifying it, would be showing it as it is here in distributive. So what we would do here is the same way. We call this popcorn. This is a 2T for tickets and 2D for drinks. We would take this and we're just going to multiply. 3 times P, which gives us 3P. 3 times 2, which gives us 6, and the variable is T. And then 3 times 2, which will give me 6, and the variable is D. And so I can put them together. Well, what sign should I put in between it? Well, I have a positive and a positive, so there's going to be a plus. And that's it. And you can see that they both give me the same thing. But this way is so much quicker, using the distributive property by representing your expression and then also simplifying your expression if you can in this case. Okay? So let's look at the second example. This is saying you have 4. I have 4 of these. So technically, this is what you have. I have 4 of these guys right here. But I want to know what that is. And you could write them all out like this and simplify them, and you would end up getting that solution. But we know that repetitive addition here is just multiplication. So I've got 4 as my factor, and I want to know what this would be if I multiply it. So I take a look at my signs. I have a plus in between here. This is positive on the outside, so I know I'm going to have a plus in between. And I'm going to take the 4 times the 2. Don't be afraid to draw your arrows if you need to. It's 8, and the variable is x. So now that becomes 8x is my first term. And then I do 4 times 3, which gives me 12. So right there is the same thing, but it just goes a lot quicker. Okay. Here we have the same expression, but in this case it's got a minus sign in between it. So I check my signs. I have a positive here. So I know that when I multiply a positive times a negative, it's going to give me a negative. So I can have a negative sign that separates my 2 terms. So I'm just going to do 4 times 2, which gives me 8x. And 4 times 3, which gives me negative 12. Check it. Well, what do I have? I have 4 of these. If I want to check it, I can do it longhand by expanding it out. Add them up, I get 8x. Negative 3, negative 3, negative 3, negative 3. I put that all into my calculator here just so we can see that. Negative 3, minus 3, minus 3, minus 3. And it gives me my negative 12 back. And you can see that both of those are the same. Now notice the difference between these two. It's because of the signs. Okay, so be careful. So let's look at this one. This one's a little bit different. It's the same, but it's a little bit different. You have a negative 4 on the outside. So we're doing by a negative 4 factor. So let's check to see what we have. Negative 4 times a positive will give me a negative. And a negative 4 times another positive will give me a negative. So I know I'm going to have a negative here in between the 2 terms. So all I'm going to do is multiply, and I get negative 4 times 2, which gives me a negative 8 on the outside. That's my first term. Then I'm going to take my second term, negative 4 times 3, which will give me my negative 12. Now, let's check this one. So how do we check it? Well, we're going to write down our terms. We have 4 of them. So there's my 4 terms. Okay? All right. But remember, they're negative. So at the very end, I'm going to make sure that I write them down. I'm going to have to slap a negative on and change the signs. I'm going to show you here in a minute. So I put these all together. Gives me 8x plus 12. But remember, I did with a negative, so I need to multiply this by a negative 1. And when I do that, I get my terms to be the same. And there they are. Okay? So let's check this one here. So now I've checked it and it's good. So number 5 is a little bit different. Same thing. You got a negative on the outside, a negative on the inside. So be careful what you may have. So if I come back here and go bam, it's going to give me a negative 8x. 4 times the negative 4 times 2. And then I do a negative 4. And this is a negative 3. So a negative times a negative gives me a positive 12. So Mr. O, how can I check that? Let's check it. 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3. Add them up, get 8x. Add them up, I get negative 12. But they're not the same. Well, it's because I had a negative on the outside. So I need to make sure I put my negative on the outside with just the 1, because I already did the 4, right? I already did the 4. But how do I turn a 4 into a negative 4? I got to multiply it by negative 1, right? I got 4 right here. So how did I change it to a negative 4? Multiply it by negative 1, and that's why I put it here. So that changes it all back. And I've checked my answer, and I'm good to go. So I know that I have it correct there. Okay? All right, so let's look at the next couple of pages here. Here's another one here about distributing property and then putting these things together. We have a couple of problems here. We'll just check these here real quick. I have a negative on the outside, a positive, and then a -5. So remember, this term is multiplying. So I can go zoop here, and then the -8 goes zoop over here. So this turns into -8 times 4y, and this turns into -8 times -5. That gives me -32y and a positive 40. So there's my first solution that I have right there for that. You can check it. I'm not going to write it out 8 times, but if you do it, you can check it by writing them out 8 times, and then remember at the end you got to multiply it by -1. So there would be your solution. Here we have a decimal. Same thing works for the decimal. I'm taking it by 12, and I'm taking this by a factor of 12.5. I want to know, what if I have this 12.5 times, what would I end up getting? Same process. Multiply the outside by the inside. So that becomes 12.5 times 3. And then I have a 2w times a 12.5. So 12.5 times 3, just so that I make sure I get it right, I'm going to put it in here. Gives me 37.5. And then 12.5 times 2w is going to give me, here, I put it in, it's going to give me a plus 25w. You could write it like this, or you could, if you want to, you could flip it around the other way as well. Let me see if I can put it the other way. It would be 25w plus 37.5. Both of those would be the same. So that would be the same, or that would be the same. Now let's plus, because that's a positive with a positive, and a positive with a positive. Give me both pluses there. All right. Number 8 is the last type of one that we have with distributing here. So it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do here with my distributing? Well, let's take a look at it. What am I going to do here with my distributing? I got a half. Well, maybe I don't know how to do a half. But remember, half is just division in this case. Or change it to a decimal. So what is 1/2 as a decimal? Remember, that's, if you don't know how that is, it's just division. It's 1 divided by 2. Gives me 0.5. So you could actually rewrite this as saying 0.5 times 6m plus 10. And when you multiply, it's the same way. I'm going to show you both ways. So there's both ways it's just written out. So if I want to do this, I'm going to take 1/2 times 6m and 1/2 times 10. Or I can do the point, if I use the decimal version, it's the other way around. 0.5 times 6m and then 10 times 0.5. So if I do this here, I have 1/2 times 6m plus 1/2 times 10. So a half of 6 is going to give me 3. A half of 10 is 5. So that's my solution. Works out the same way if I do this way. I'm going to show you. I put this in here. I do 0.5 times 6. Should get me 3 as well. 0.5 times 10. Same thing as well. But remember my terms there. 3m plus 5. The big key here is either show your work, and the other big key is, if you get frustrated, check it. So you can check some of these, and you can also show your work. Okay, it's very simple and you can get frustrated with these because it's so easy with these things. But be careful of your signs is the next thing. This is all because it's positive, 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 positive there. Okay, we want to stop the video here to make sure you get the basics of your distributive property down before we move into this other part. So if you got these first 8 examples, you're good, and then you're going to have an assignment to work on so that to check for your understanding about your distributive property. All right. Thank you very much. The next video or the next part we'll pick up will be the next couple parts right here. All right, see you later.